I thought to make a very short video, a little bit based on the experiences that I have and from the things that my students also report to me, to identify a little bit 7 mistakes that we make when we practice Qigong, in particular those things that can really prevent us from developing in this path. This wants to be like one of those videos, you know, the 3 things to grow spiritually, or all those things. And I thought in this way because somehow some of these points are kind of recurring things that I see happening all the time. So I will go straight into it. The first problem that I see, it's of course finding the right tools. It's not very easy, and actually I'm very lucky to have found the Nei Qi Gong system, although I wasn't looking for any kind of impressive energy practice at the time. I wanted to work on myself, to grow personally. I realized that I wasn't connected to my body, and I found Shifu Costantino Valente. I liked the person in a very simple way. It made me understand that I didn't know how to use my body, although I was practicing Buddhist and Tantric practices, very intellectual things. And what I realized nowadays, because people write me saying that they have been practicing for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, and they kind of come with the attitude, I'm not sure if this system is going to work for me, because I've tried several things and nothing seemed to work. So the first point that I would say that can prevent us from growing into Qigong practices, it's actually finding the right tools. Nowadays, everybody on the web is advertising some good marketing behind it sometime, and promising the most beautiful things, and sometimes in a very kind of superficial and spiritual and mystical way. But let's face it, it's very difficult to find something that works most of the time, because the things that we find on the web, in life in general, are not backed up by a lineage of people who have practiced that system and that system has brought certain results in their life. So we are talking about something that proves its efficiency. And nowadays we are bombarded with so many things, and we can find so many things, which is also the beauty of the web nowadays, to browse and finding anything that we want. But unfortunately, it's very difficult to find something that works, and we have to be skeptic, and we might be practicing something for 10 years, 20 years and having no result, and then all of a sudden we find something and we practice for a couple of years or even less, and we have so much results that it becomes almost very strange. Like for myself, sometimes when I confront myself with new students and they have actually more experience than me in one sense, because they practiced Qigong for a longer time, but we cannot share experiences in the sense that on a practical base, certain foundations have not been created. My suggestion, of course, is have a little bit of luck, because it's about that. Let's face it, we don't know why we find the right things. Some people might look for some kind of help or some kind of tools all their life, and maybe eventually after 20 years something comes in their life that works. Some people might be misled by all this external chatting that people make with promises and different systems. So I would say being skeptical and be open at the same time. Try something out for yourself. If you see benefits, if you see practical results happening, I will personally remove all the other distractions, and I will just do one path till I get to the end. Bearing in mind that the goal is not at the end of the end of the path, but it's actually in the process. But I can still mark through that path certain practical achievements that make me understand that something really works. The second point that I see that can create a problem in our Qigong practice is actually constancy. It's fascinating to stay in nature or to do some kind of slow movement and to just go very superficially about it. But Gong means work in Chinese, so it requires dedication. And like everything in life, we have to persevere and we have to apply a certain level of energy, which I mean time, in the sense of our daily life, to make something grow. Whether it is your business, whether it is a relationship, whether it is a hobby that you might have, you have to dedicate some time to it. And especially in Qigong practice, like in anything else, we have to restrict ourselves. In fact, what I found out in my life is that a little bit of limitation and of discipline, which might sound like a restriction of freedom, brings a greater freedom, and also brings result. Because if I train myself constantly, eventually I will see day by day or week by week that I'm growing in that system. So what I'm trying to say basically is this: don't practice Nei Qi Gong, at least if you're planning to practice once a week, or maybe to gather with some friends and do some kind of nice movements externally. It's a serious work. It requires dedication, and it has amazing fruits that really you can find out for yourself. But the prerogative, the fundamental thing is that constancy is there. I practice every day, even if it is 30-40 minutes, because it does require loads of time, but I have to do it every day, otherwise I cannot see anything growing in that direction. So the third point is knowledge as an obstacle. I know it might sound like a contradiction, because we are very intellectual beings. So the first thing we do is that we read something about that specific topic rather than going and doing it, which is counterintuitive to a certain extent. It's like working on the land and you read about plants and everything instead of going and starting to work on it. I say that it is an obstacle for several reasons. Sometimes I have students or people who contact me with the idea of learning Nei Qi Gong, for instance, and they already know everything. I mean, they know more than me. And to one extent, they know more than me, in the sense that they know all the Chinese points and all the different things. I personally know nothing. And I started with this kind of approach, even having difficulties in memorizing Chinese names, and I still go in that direction. Because as long as I can feel the point in my body, I don't mind if it's called John instead of Mary. If it works for me, it's clear, that's the main thing. And sometimes I end up confronting myself with some people who argue about the name of certain points, and in this system they do this, and the other system they do that. So here we can see how knowledge can even create friction between your teacher and you as students in this case. If we want to go and learn a system, we have to be fully open about it. If we know something, I think we have to forget about that, because it's easy to go on the web and browse for some kind of meridian picture of the body, or exploring the concept of yin and yang and the 5 elements, and being debating here around the table with 4 friends because the fire and the water and the earth, they mix together. But what does it mean? Those things are just analogies. Those things are just words. They don't represent the actual fact. Like if I say table, it's not a table. This thing we get together, we call it table. But it's table, it's a pointing. So if I just stop on the superficial aspect of this field, I will never understand what it is. And what I mean in a practical way is, if I'm already dissecting and dividing yin and yang, and this is a sensation that it is yin and yang, when in reality those things are actually temporary and are related and interchangeable with each other, I might stop to a sensation that is not actually the full expression of that element. I don't know if you see what I'm trying to say. So you are preventing yourself from discovering the actual thing because you think to know. In this case, knowledge represents an obstacle in our growth. It's like, as I said, going to a teacher and your cup is already full. The teacher cannot tell you anything because you know everything already about it. So my suggestion is, if you decide to approach a system and you don't have those experiences in your body, in this case of Qigong, just be fully open. Just practice. It's so important to memorize the names of the points. I can understand not everybody's like me. Some people like to know all the Chinese points we're working with. Nothing wrong about that. But if we just get stuck to that level, it's not going to work. So my suggestion is very simple. Just as my teacher says, practice, practice, practice. There is no best way actually to grow in a Nei Qi Gong system, and I think in anything else, that just doing it, and you will see for yourself what it really means to live a specific process. And I will tell you that probably you won't care anymore about discussing and arguing on all these Facebook groups and other places where people talk, and maybe they don't even practice. They just read the books and they go around talking about these things. So my suggestion is very simple for this obstacle. Just practice and find out for yourself with the help of somebody who has a clear experience of what is teaching. Distorting the practice is another obstacle. What I'm trying to say is this, is that we bring our mind in our practices. So although somebody learns from me, let's say, a series of exercises, that person is going to practice different than another person. Why? Because our mind gets into the process. We are not able to just sit and do the work with a little bit of distance. So we are not able to be like scientists. This is something that I always invite my students to do. Be skeptical about the path. Be skeptical about your mind. Be skeptical about the experiences that you're having. Be like a scientist in the sense that don't assume things. If one day you have one sensation, don't assume that that sensation is going to happen all the time when you do that particular exercise. Put everything under a lens. When you see that something repeats itself over time, you have data and you might have found out one aspect of reality in your body that works in that particular way. And then you can verify with the help of your teacher. Well, what I want to say with this point, it's actually that if I sit and execute the instructions of my teacher, first of all, I might doubt even that very simple instructions might be actually the thing, because we tend to add. You know, if I say to you, bring the attention on the pi way, whatever it is, maybe we bring some expectation connected to it. Oh, the pi way is connected to the sky, so I'm connecting to the sky. Or the attention on the wane, oh, I'm connecting to the heart. But no, maybe you're just done bringing your attention to that point, nothing more than that. And by changing the practice with our expectation, with our knowledge, intellectual knowledge of how things supposedly work, we're actually distorting the practice. So the practice becomes less effective. We spend more time, we waste time at a particular level of our path only because, and we're not growing, only because we are messing up with the practice itself, rather than just executing and observing with a little distance. So distorting a practice can be an obstacle in our growth. Distorting the practice due to our intellectual knowledge, due to our expectation, due to a friend saying that he feels some kind of connection with the ground when he does this thing, this particular exercise, can actually distort an apparently very simple technology and not make it work. Because let's face it and let's remember that Qigong, Nei Qi Gong is a technology. It's based on the human body. The human body is one. We all have the same body. There are taller people, fatter people, blonde people, whatever it is, but the human body is one. And we have to see like an understanding, a neutral principle that can be applied on the human beings. So these principles are valid and are transmitted generation and generation, lineages and traditions, because they work. So if we think that we know, if we think that something will bring a specific result, and with our attention we move those instructions towards another direction, we change it. And we have to remember, we are doing a very subtle work. It's an internal work that requires lots of attention. Where we practice, our mind at the beginning is all over the place. Our emotion, maybe we're tired, we don't want to practice. Our body, we see our limitation. It's not that pleasant neither. It requires an enormous silence to do the right thing. And an humbleness to just execute the simplicity sometimes of the teachings that you receive from your teacher without adding anything on top of it. And I say this for your good, not because you are my students, but in general. If you go to a teacher, just be humble, because if he's teaching you something, it means that thing is work. For how simple it might look to you, remember that our attention is the most precious thing that we have in the world. We have only one attention. We can have many houses, we can have lots of money, we can have many cars, we can have many properties. Attention is just one. So when we execute some exercises, if we distort our attention with expectation and with some kind of ideas about what we are doing, we are already changing that very simple instructions, effective, that we have received from our teacher. So don't change the practice, just be open. Basic mistakes to accumulate qi. This is something that I was surprised to see. First of all, because I didn't study intellectually qigong before actually getting into Nei Qi Gong and ending up being an instructor, which is something that to a certain extent I did want to do, and still, I'm kind of struggling in it, in the sense that I don't want to be in the position of the teacher, but rather of somebody passing some tools in the best way that I can, hopefully. But one common thing that I saw many times, and I keep on seeing through pictures on the web, through comments of naive people saying, I practice in nature, barefoot, because barefoot I ground with the earth, and all the rest of it. There is one very practical video that you can see on my website, where Shifu Costantino Valente, my teacher, founder of the Nei Qi Gong system, you can see a qi emission. And usually when a master does an emission, of course, there is the master, there is the person receiving the emission, and there is someone else holding the ankles to acting as the ground, because qi is attracted by the ground. In that video you can see, we will try to put the link somewhere on this video so you can watch it. Nobody was around, so it was just me and him. So he put some fabric, wet fabric, under my ankles, and he connected with one wire my body to the heart of the socket, to make sure that the qi emission was traveling through the body and going towards that direction and leaving, actually. This is a very practical thing that we can see. We can be here discussing about philosophy, but I feel better when I practice in nature, barefoot. I know it's amazing. I love being barefoot. I'm barefoot all the time. But what I'm saying, if your goal is to accumulate qi, you have to isolate yourself from the floor, either using good shoes or putting in yoga mats or something, or practicing on a wooden floor, using something that isolates yourself from the ground. Otherwise, you might be wasting your time and years trying to do something which is not going to happen in the right way, because in one direction is going somewhere else, the energy that you're trying to gather. Going beyond the practices is another problem. You see, especially in the Nei Qi Gong system, because of the videos that are available on my website and everywhere, that have a specific function, don't get me wrong. The videos of the qi emissions for me have one specific goal: make you understand that the system works. Nothing more than that. They are external manifestation of a bigger process that takes place in ourselves, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. There is something, I don't know where it ends, below, honestly speaking. Why I'm saying this? Because sometimes, most of the time, it really depends from the kind of people. People are very attracted by that kind of result. So we practice with the attachment towards that specific result. First of all, it takes a damn work to get to that level. And my wish is that students, they go beyond the practice of Nei Qi Gong itself. What I'm trying to say here. It's true that growing spiritually, growing energetically, has certain implications in our life. And we can see that when we get to a very high degree that the Nei Qi Gong system is able to take us to, we can prove certain things. But let's turn the attention inwardly. What's happening inside the body? There is such amount of vital energy that I can put it out and I can feel alright, because actually it's a bad process for our health to pull out our vital energy. But I have more energy. I have more energy means I have more resources. My work can work better, my body can work better, my mind can work better, my emotion can work better. I have more energy in my life. I can perform better in life. And according to my natural inclination, I might go more in a spiritual direction, I might go more into a martial art direction, I might heal other people. These are the three main branches, if we can call it goals, of Nei Qi Gong. But there is a bigger process, which for me is very important. I try to stretch it all the time with my students, and when people contact me after having watched one of those ads on YouTube or videos, I say there is something bigger that we don't see on those videos that is available. In fact, the Qi mission is not the main thing. It doesn't assure that we grow as human beings, personal, spiritual, whatever word you like more. It's just a skill that we're using. But if we practice, going back to the reason why it can be an obstacle to have a small perspective and being too much attached to the result. If we practice with attachment to the result, funny enough, we lower our growth. Because the best way to practice, it's the so-called meditative state, which I will try to make a video about this, because actually the meditative state is a psychological and physical state, a very particular one. But being empty and just executing certain exercises is going to make us grow faster than being there and practicing to achieve certain things. If you practice with constancy and dedication, you will achieve certain skills and certain possibilities in the Nei Qi Gong path. This is a fact. But what I'm trying to say also is that there is a bigger possibility as human being, that is to unite ourselves with something bigger than ourselves. So instead of practicing just with our small mind and sitting there or standing whatever and doing the things because we want to be more, look how big will become my ego, I want to be more, I want to have these specific skills, I want to do Qi mission, all these kind of silly things. What would be the other way if I adopt a passive attitude towards the practice? More receptive, more as a process of evolution of myself. Then I will understand and I will go even beyond the practice itself. I will not practice Nei Qi Gong just to grow my vital energy, which of course having more energy allows us to grow spiritually even more. But I will discover something more. And as a human being, I will have a present life, present emotion, more stability, more perspective, and finally, when it comes to the time to go, I will be happy to go and not afraid to go, because I will have had the chance, without being attached to it, to have touched something bigger than myself. Just to make it short, just practice, if I can give you a tip, just for practicing. Practice not to achieve a specific result. Practice with the understanding that you are working on yourself 360 degrees. And you can extend your boundaries on an energetic level, on a mind level, and on a blissful level. That can be the best thing you can do, in my opinion. You see, when we start Nei Qi Gong or Qigong practices, we might be attracted to the vital energy aspect because it's kind of esoteric, because it's kind of mystical, and because maybe we saw some special capabilities and we thought, wow, that's kind of cool, I want to explore other possibilities in life, I want to have some kind of silly superpowers, maybe I can move that pen on the table, which is quite silly, isn't it? But it's something maybe we do at the beginning. Or maybe we want to heal physically. Maybe we have a problem, so we want to heal ourselves. Or maybe we are just unbalanced because life is kind of tough. And let's face it, the world is quite ugly. It's dangerous. No, people are not nice all the time. It's kind of rough reality, let's face it. So maybe we're trying to find a tool to improve ourselves in one of those aspects, either physically, emotionally, or mentally. I want to be more clear with my mind. I don't want to have conflict inside, all the rest of it. which I think that it is the best way of approaching the practice to a certain extent. But what we'll find out when we start to turn the attention inwardly is the possibility of the practical dissolution of the person within the practice. While at the beginning we start to practice, and maybe it's even a little bit painful, and we feel our mind struggles, or we feel our tension in the body, we feel our irritation is standing there 40 minutes and doing a dumb work. We go in with a little me, but then after this initial friction that might last as much as your mind is hard and you are hard, physically, mentally, emotionally, and then actually we can tap into something bigger. So we go in with the little me to solve a little problem, or what we might discover for ourselves, naturally, not intellectually, is the reconciliation with the flow of life, with the spontaneity and naturalness of life, with, let's call it divine existence, let's call it whatever you want to call it. You know, this kind of word are a bit silly in one sense, but we can use the practice actually to dissolve ourselves into a bigger process. And for sure at that stage we realized that the practice is not just about the practice. The practice is the tool, but the destination is another thing. Or I would say, the practice is what cleans the mirror up to the point that you see it. And then you can reconcile with it. And then you can align yourself with life. And then you will have no inner conflict. You will have no movement. You will have the ability of just being present naturally, without effort. So the practice helps us to clean and remove the internal tension, the mental habits, the bad emotions, the obsessive emotions that we may have, the physical limitation of pain, of stiffness, to ultimately relax, which is a funny thing, no? So we go as little me, and then we might discover actually the pleasure after a little bit of pain at the beginning. And sometimes, you know, the pain comes back because life is a tricky experience. But once you go and drink from another perspective, then you know that that's the way. And then you probably realize that the external world plays just a marginal role in your experience. There is something much bigger in yourself that you can find in the world. My suggestion is just be patient with yourself and do the best you can, and don't even compete with yourself. If the day before you did a certain exercise in a certain way, and the day after, because of life circumstances, you don't feel you feel a little bit low or you don't do it well, just be loving with yourself, you know, and don't compare yourself to others, but even to yourself, because they are just images of the mind. Just stay with what it is and use the practice as a way to come back to a natural state of being.